hosting it. We've got two of my favorite marketers in automotive. We've got Ashley and Tyler here. Hello. We'll let you introduce yourselves here in a little bit and go into more detail. Well, there we are. There's our email addresses. We have this thing at the end too. So if you want to reach out to folks directly, feel free. And as we go, as we always do, we record this, we share it on afterwards. If you have questions, hit that Q&A button in there, use the chat. I'll field those. Ashley and Tyler, welcome. You guys are welcome to jump in there as well too. And if you haven't seen TradePending TV, that is all the stuff that we're doing. Some of it's just nothing but fun. We're going on interviewing people on the street, asking them about cars. We do the same thing in dealerships. We got some educational content on there as well. Tune into that. I know Ashley and Tyler both love that. Just see you guys nodding, and if you're supposed to nod now affirmatively, that's right. We've also got Dealership Video Academy. These are for the frontline professionals on your team that are looking to get better at doing video, whether they're in sales or service. You guys should join that. We'll share the deck out afterwards. You guys are going to have all that. So all that being said, that's the logistics. Man, we got through that in like a minute. That's how it should be. Stopping it. Ashley, Tyler, welcome. Thank you for being here. I'll have you introduce yourself. Tyler, we'll go with you first, then over to Ashley. Tyler, tell us about yourself. Who are you? Where are you?
Tyler, located currently in Fayetteville, Arkansas, where we're headquartered with Superior Automotive Group. We've got stores in Arkansas and Texas and Florida, and we've also got 7 Kubota tractor stores in Oklahoma, Arkansas, Missouri, Texas. So we're actively growing, looking for that expansion, but also, excited to sit down with you guys. I mean, I've got 16 years in automotive. It's all I've ever done. I've worked for 2 manufacturers. I've worked in the field. I've worked in consulting, and met a lot of cool people along the way. So I'm excited to be here.
And I learned by asking, last name was pronounced Rauch, not Rock,
yes.
As I was. So there we go. And you also help catch car thieves on your spare time. Is that?
We do, yeah. We, when in doubt, good old social media will help you catch just about anybody. You catch a lot of crazy comments in the process, but ultimately we did wind up finding what we were looking for. So kudos to the fine folks at Meta and the fine folks in the town where we had one of our stores get broken into.
Ashley, over to you.
Hi, I am Ashley Cavazos. I am the marketing director at DeMontrond Auto Group in Houston, Texas. I've been in auto about 15 years in many different roles, from receptionist to BDC, and super excited to be back in Texas. I moved back here. It'll be 2 years in June. If you're not familiar with DeMontrond, they're family owned, local to Houston, about over 70 years. We have 12 auto rooftops and 4 RV stores as well. So that's been a new one for me, getting to know that part of the industry. It's been really fun and interesting.
Yeah, and you got to meet a lot of people at NADA or NADA or NADA, however you choose to say that. Was there one person that maybe stuck out that you talked for like 10 minutes with about Disney World?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously met a lot of great people and got to see a lot of familiar faces, but a really cool moment happened at one of the events. I was able to meet Tom Hanks. Was totally not expecting to do that, and actually talked with him for about 10 minutes. Half of it was about the session I spoke on Saturday at NADA, and the other half is us geeking out over Disney. So Tom is a total Disney fanatic, and I told him I had just done my first Disney Christmas trip, and he was like, "Did you do the candlelight processional? Did you do Mickey's Christmas party?" And we had a great conversation. It was pretty surreal.
That is amazing. And the picture on LinkedIn, like, you looked exactly how I would look, and it's just like,
yeah.
All right, let's jump into it. So Ashley, since you're on a roll here, tell us, we're jumping into 2024. What worked for you? What didn't? You got your marketing hat on. How do you answer that question?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the really cool things that I explored in 2024 and it's part of what we're going into the new year with as well, but really digging more into our data itself, and the buzzword of CDP, and utilizing our first party data, but also working with Amazon advertising and doing some OTT and display and streaming advertising with Amazon data. It's been pretty fun to explore and like tweak things and see what works and doesn't work, and just see the wins and the losses that come from it, but then getting to hone that in with a few stores, and then launching across other stores as well as we work through a strategy. And honestly, last year was a big deep dive for me it was my first full year as the marketing director at DeMontrond. And it was a big deep dive into expenses and where's our money going. So when I look at what was working, what was not working, there was a lot of money that we were spending that honestly even the GMs didn't know they were looking. They were like, I hadn't looked at these lines before in the financial statement, didn't know this was going there. So it was that to me was like a big learning experience, because I hadn't dug into financial statements like that before.
Really quick, was there something you saw in there that you reallocated or retuned, a particular channel or a particular strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. So we were doing a lot of linear advertising, and it's not to say that there's not a place for it. But when you have a store that has a smaller budget, not a whole lot of co-op, you have to be very strategic in the ROI with that. And that's honestly where the Amazon advertising came in, and where we started exploring some videos. And the really cool thing is I have a videographer that I contract, and I brought him in to do some videos, but then I was a little crunched for time at one point, and I used my iPhone and I filmed some videos. And I have a 15 Pro Max, and you see the commercials of like the quality of the video, but I did these videos, and my leadership team just like, they love the videos I did on my phone. Not that they didn't like the videographer videos, but they're like, hey, these are really good. Who did these? And I'm like, I did on my phone. And they couldn't believe it. So it was just really cool to kind of get in the weeds like that, and dig in and have some fun with the team as well. They hadn't done that before. They hadn't done any videos on site. They'd always been at a production studio and green screen and stuff like that.
Right on. Tyler, what worked for you and what didn't last year?
Well, I'm not unlike Ashley, that last year was my first full year in the position. I had started the summer prior. We spent the first 6 months of 23 just observing to try to figure out where we thought we could get better. And again, unlike Ashley's experience, we found that, I guess, frankly, we had too many cooks in the kitchen on the vendor side. And if you want to make it a boat rowing analogy, we had a bunch of folks with oars, but everyone was moving a different direction. We had 13 vendors doing a number of things. So we might have a website provider who also did some of the Digad stuff, and we have folks doing Digad that did SEO for a different store, but it was very inconsistent, and it made finding out where we were spending, what we were spending, and what it was doing for us difficult. And it also was just an incredible, I don't mean to say this negatively, but incredible waste of time. I mean, marketing teams generally in the automotive space are not that big. You might have a few people that you can leverage for different positions and different things and different objectives. But if you come in and you're spending the first 2 weeks of the month just trying to keep up with vendor calls because you've got 3 different website providers and 4 different folks doing paid search. I mean, we've got 15 dealerships. And like I said, we're in different states. You can only stretch that so far. So what we did last year that I thought was the best thing we could have done was, one, we mapped it. A vendor map is something that I've done in my consulting days, where I basically said, let's put it on paper and see, who is it? What are you spending? How often do you talk to them? Do you know who to contact? Do you have a login to the dashboard? What can you attribute to that tool? And we figured out quickly we had a lot of waste. And kind of the second part of that was whittling it down. So we went from 13 vendors down to 5. I also feel like strategically we needed a checks and balance. I didn't want the fox watching the hen house. I didn't want the same company doing all of the jobs, because if something goes wrong, it's easier to have it swept under the rug or not see it. But if you have to force these vendors to, come together and play in the sandbox together, we felt like that was going to be better for us and work harder. So we identified a couple partners in the market. Some mutual friends of ours at Reunion Marketing have been great for a long time for me, and they've proved to be great in this role. And obviously we took TradePending on as a partner, and That P word was also one of the biggest things. Was we needed partners. We didn't want people that were just checking the box. We wanted folks that we knew we could call in an emergency or text heading into NADA, or whatever the case was. We wanted folks that weren't just going to call us when it was time for a budget increase or for a monthly call where they were going to show me up and down hours. I wanted someone that would call and say, hey, this new product's coming. Do you want to test it at a couple of stores as a pilot? Who's struggling? What can we deep dive? So this fluid relationship. And I think paring down 13 vendors down to 5, finding the folks that we knew were the best fit, and then streamlining it. So we're on one website provider, primarily OEM compliance wise, one trade, one virtual retailing tool. We tried to really streamline it and reduce the number of phone calls, reduce the number of vendors, reduce the amount that we had to spend to track it, which made the tracking easier and actually helped with the ROI because we had relationships that we knew were working for us across the board and not just in pockets.
Right on. A vendor map, it sounds really necessary, but also like the most boring and worst map of all time.
It's the most important map of all time. I would talk about it for years in my previous position, and it was like, yeah, but who's really going to do that? And then when you really start to do it, it doesn't take long and it's not that difficult. And if it's
gotta be so eye-opening. You're like, oh no.
Yeah. Oh no. Why is it so hard to track that down? And why don't we know who to call in that scenario? It's like, I used to joke that if you called the marketing director or a CMO or a dealer principal and you said, what do we spend on marketing? You might get 3 different answers. And I mean, it's not always that easy to communicate the exact number, but ultimately, why wouldn't you at least have some line of sight in terms of what that number looks like or who you're using for specific vendors. So we put a whole, full court press on that side of the business last year, and it made life, I think, a lot easier. And, to be fair, going into this year, it's also opened up some new opportunities for us. So we're going to continue to round that wheel, and hopefully we can continue to make way in 2025.
Was there something you did last year? You're like, you know what? I'm glad we tried that, but I'm not doing that again.
There wasn't a lot that we did that I wouldn't try again, but I did learn in the process that it is easy to fall into specific buckets where you say, well, we should be doing a little bit of this, a little bit of this, a little bit of this. And I think in last year, we were so focused on this foundation of who we're going to trust and how we're going to spend and what we're going to spend that we didn't think objectively like maybe PMAX works better in certain markets than others. And maybe that commands a little bit more budget in that market than it would in a different market. And so I think maybe I had blinders on a little bit. We were well represented in multiple mediums, but I think we need to look harder at not being afraid to cut in one area and push another just because the industry may not feel the same way. It's not about the industry. It's about what sells us cars and drives the most conversions and ultimately gives us the most at-bats. So I'd say that's probably the one thing we'll do harder this year is more scrutiny on the mix and not trying to play the popularity game.
Yeah, PMAX, that black hole that we just pour money into. You never know. All right.
Yeah.
I know that both of you guys you pay really close attention to the details when it's coming to performance. So as you look forward to 2025, like what are you paying attention to from a numbers perspective? What are the most important, dare I say, KPIs that you're tracking?
I mean, one big one for me is I constantly am looking at this, but I'm tracking what is my cost per sold looking like, right? That's a big one when I'm looking at expenses, and as similar to Tyler's, we were digging in and who's a vendor, who's a partner, who are we having those relationships with, but what's it doing for the actual, like, are we driving some business and increasing our market share? Is our cost per sold dropping down? When you look at the data, NADA typically says, $180 to $225 cost per sold. Granted, with some things in the market, right, sometimes it's just going to be a little bit higher, and it's just understanding those trends. I am looking at my third-party listings very closely, and I think that was one thing last year that if I look at not what not where maybe something I did that went wrong, but I think one thing I did do was hold on to some a little bit longer out of that FOMO of like, oh my gosh, I need to have my cars listed here because everybody has their cars listed there. But if it's not driving traffic, if it's not doing anything, if you can look at the metrics and know that it's not doing anything for you, then why are you putting your money into that when you can drive customers into your your actual website or some other avenue. And so I think that's one of the big things going into this year is we've slimmed a lot of that down, and now who else do we need to evaluate or shift around?
Can I couple onto that? Because I think the third party piece of that's important. And I think those metrics are always going to feel tricky because from a third party perspective, you can show massive metrics. Like to someone that's not familiar with those, you could say, hey, there were 1, 2, 300,000 SRP views. I mean, those are huge numbers. And to the average person, you're going, well, yeah, extremely well represented. Or you look at lead volume and go, yeah, I got a ton of leads from that source. But she's not wrong. And I think we kind of reframed how we approach those relationships too and said, one, we have to make sure we have the right package for our store because most of those contracts were signed years ago and we probably have gone through changes through COVID like everybody else. So one, we had to make sure it was right. Two, we also, I look closely at cost per car sold on the financials every month in addition to tracking that budget. And I realized that, I was not holding the third parties to the same standard that I was holding the rest of the marketing to. And I thought, well, that's not a fair assessment for the rest of the market. Like if I'm going to call, TradePending and say, hey, based on the number of folks that, converted on a payments tool compared to the number of people that gave me a lead from a CarGurus or a Cars.com or Carfax listings, I don't know why I would treat you both different. If you're both looking for at-bats, they should both be counted at least within the same arena. But that being said, one thing I focused harder on was, well, maybe the sales data or lead data is not fair to hold those third parties accountable on. So why don't I just be a customer for a day? And when you dig into the tools as a platform from a customer perspective, you learn a lot about what that looks like. I might get a lot of leads, but if other people in the market are also getting leads with my product and I'm getting their product, is it really as valuable to lead if I'm getting an email with my car and 4 of my competitors' cars? No, in my opinion, it's not. So maybe that's just objective, but it's frustrating at times. And that's where you have to decide. Maybe it's an effective cost per lead or cost per sale, but ineffective in the way that I want to be the only person on that lead for that car, not my competitors. And so you really have to dig into it.
It's so true. It's so true. Yeah. You have to secret shop yourself on these sites because you want to make sure that they're sending your customers the right information. I mean, Tyler, you're hitting it spot on. It's really frustrating when you're spending thousands of dollars a month, just one rooftop, right? And then you see the follow-up from an email perspective. And you're like, well, why am I getting these cars as well? I submitted for this dealership. And it makes you wonder, what else are they getting and who else is getting deterred from you?
Yeah, totally. And Tyler, what are you going to be experimenting with in this coming year?
So we're gonna try. I'm gonna try to. I don't know how much I would say experiment. So we leaving last year, our owners got really excited about the prospect of what if we just threw the rules out the window and said cost per metrics aren't important to us anymore, and we doubled our budget in the digit space? Now, obviously, the marketers, the agency, and myself went, well, I'm not going to double budget because I don't want to have to explain why our cost per metrics went out the window. And they said, well, yeah, but what if you just experimented with the mindset that the cost per metrics didn't matter as much, in terms of cost per click or cost per conversion? Obviously, keeping cost per car sold at the end of the day would be important. But if it drives the traffic we're hoping it'll drive, the cost per car sold metric will stay in check. And so we, leaving Q4, we experimented with throwing, double the budget at times, and sometimes, 40% increases in budget, but we did that. And to our surprise, we finished with a tremendous boost, and we had a couple stores that had the extra budget in the water the longest. So the longest we'd had it for any of the stores would be about 45 days going into 2025. And a lot of them finished with record months, record for gross, record for sales.
You didn't tell them you were doing this, did you?
No. So we kept that a secret because we didn't want it to be a placebo effect of, oh, hey, we're going to spend a bunch more money and they're going to go, great. Well, if I sell more cars, it's because of you. So we learned a lot about that. And I think that's what we'll continue to experiment with, was that uncomfortable feeling of, if we spend more and it sells more, it will keep the metric I ultimately have to keep in check. But we have to be comfortable that it might throw some other things out of whack. And funny enough, so far, we really haven't even thrown those metrics out of whack. We'll get calls from the agency. They're like, hey, by the way, you're still at or below industry average. But But I also think we need to be, not be reluctant to change again. I thought if we made these big changes in 2024, we'd have this huge foundation that we could build, and we can, and we will. But relationships change. I mean, vendor, you get someone at a vendor that calls you and they decide, 6 months later, there's a better opportunity, they leave. I mean, things change. And the reality is that if you're stuck on the relationship based off of what it used to be, you might get left in the dust. And so we're not trying to be reluctant to change. We're trying to be more open-minded about the fact that it may not always look so pretty, but ultimately, if we sell more cars from it and our customers are happy and we're building that portfolio, or maybe we break more into leasing in a retail market, like those wins have to be taken just as much as anything else we've done in the past.
Right. Ashley, what are you experimenting with this year?
Definitely moving more into that personalized approach that I kind of mentioned, exploring with some CDP experiences. I was able to, one of my partners that I kind of utilize that I'm doing CDPs with, have introduced group enterprise CDP. So I'm super excited for that because we always talk about what does that loyalty perspective look like? We can see it in a mining tool from a single rooftop, but what about overarching as a group? What is that customer doing? So I'm really excited to get more into that personalized messaging approach, digging into that data. We spend so much money, as Tyler, we've been kind of going back and forth on that seems to be the big thing, right? We're marketers and we're talking about expenses, but we spend so much money trying to drive new traffic into our stores, and there's so much in our database already between service and sales, and not only just like your sold customers, but what about your lost customers, the customers who shopped with you 2-3 years ago, who bought elsewhere, who might be in a position to trade into another vehicle? What are we doing to try to get those customers back into our doors? Or is it just like, they bought another car elsewhere, move on, I'll see you later? Why not utilize some tools that you can help mine some of that data as well? So that's what I'm really excited for going into 2025, and really also building on a branding message for the group overall. We've been doing a lot of great things. We did a season of giving, first time, we've done this. And so in November, we partnered up with the Houston Food Bank. We've done a lot of charitable contributions and partnerships, but it's never been truly organized across the group. So we did a food drive with the food bank in November. We did a really great toy drive in December with an organization that works with the kids in the CPS program. And so I'm also just really looking forward to, kind of the grassroots stuff and doing what I think for me on the marketing side, I love to do is be in the community, get to know the people that we're serving and who live in our area, and how we can partner up with them as well.
You're hitting upon something that I heard about recently, and it was just marketable moments. And the whole premise was like, there's not always something that's going to happen every month that we can really go out to the world and market. So we have to make that ourselves. We have to make our own marketable moments. And I love hearing you share that story. And so we'll pose this question to you, Ashley, first. So this gets into budget allocation. So how do you think about taking that budget allocation from the linear and traditional stuff to digital to community events? How are you slicing up the pie this year?
Yeah, so I probably slimmed my linear budget down to what it was to about 30%, honestly, of that. And I've got
Where was it before?
so it was probably, so 30% of what it was. So total budget, it was probably about 50%
Okay.
of the total budget. And so I've slimmed that down. But of that 50%, like I cut that down, and we're probably using 30% of it now. And it's because, we also have some great just partnerships with the Houston Astros, the Texans, right? We have some big teams here that we like to make sure that we're staying relevant on, and there's some great opportunity to brand yourselves. But yeah, so I'm really trying to target that into putting it into the CDP program, and putting it into the Amazon advertising, and also just content, like getting videographer on site and getting some videos out there. I came into DeMontrond and we had used an agency, and I still partner with this agency, and they're a huge help because I am a team of one. right? And I am doing all of the things while also training on digital processes and stuff like that. And so I heavily rely on my agency, but we had never had an in-house marketing director before for about 8 years.
Wow.
So it was all, outside services. So it's been really trying to get in and get on the ground. So I'm living in the stores about 80% of the time, getting to know them, seeing where the opportunity lies.
Tyler, what about you? How are you slicing up your budget this year? Any big swings or different from last year that you haven't touched on already?
Yeah, so I don't know that we're going to make any big swings. I mean, I told you we doubled down on the Digit side, which I'm really happy with. But I think on the digital to traditional breakup, we're north of 80% digital, which I'm happy with. Obviously, month to month, things might change. We may choose to do a large sale out of one of our campuses, and we might heavy up then. So looking across the year, I think it averages out to 83% digital versus traditional. But on the philanthropic side, I mean, it's a tricky game because on one hand, you can put money towards tremendous organizations that will appreciate what you're doing, but you don't see it in the what do you call it, in the community, right? Like, if we were to donate a bunch of money to a hospital, that's amazing. It goes a long way, but, also supporting a team, a local baseball team, or supporting a high school basketball team, or providing camp registration to kids who otherwise wouldn't be able to afford to go. I mean, those are the things that kind of make me tick, but I approach it a little bit different. I look at where I think I can best find the pool of money to do the most good. I don't want to be the guy that supported 50 things with $50. I'd rather go a little bit heavier, but make sure that the people that had the opportunity to benefit from it are like, man, maybe I didn't buy a car there. Maybe I'll never buy a car there. But, every time I see my kid couldn't wipe a smile off his face coming home from camp, I'm going to remember that, somebody at that group helped make that possible. And you joke about mountain biking, but we've been supporters of, Fayetteville Mountain Bike Club, which is, helping get kids into the sport that otherwise wouldn't have had a chance in this community. And not making it a barrier of entry where, bikes are expensive, as you know, and it's a slippery slope. You can't just go out and pick one up, but we make it accessible. So we're trying to do things that we know ultimately will serve the community at the very best we can. But I kind of back into it from what pool of funds are available. You might look at an LMA fund through certain brands or manufacturers, and you might look at other brands and manufacturers who just have a really generous program where the process of submitting for the co-op is very easy, and then the documentation is easy to track down, and maybe you do more out of that store. So we are going to maintain kind of what we've done in the past. I think we did a good job of making that jump in 2024, and I'd look to maintain it in 25. But yeah, as far as how we're going to slice things up, I think we're going to continue to push really hard on pre-roll, paid social, and OTT. I think those were unsung heroes for us. When we saw budget increases on those mediums, we felt the traffic increase. I think the industry is going to start moving away from some of the mediums that made their popularity first. Like, I think paid search is amazing, but I think there's just so many other places to spend your money and be represented, and more exposure, more bang for your buck. So, maybe we'll move some money into other places where we can control more of that narrative, and it's not just a bidding war, or where maybe the money's more effective and the reach is more expensive. But I guess I will say with that, we also have to make sure we understand that exposure is great, but if you're driving folks back to a site and you've got this great omni-channel approach where everything they've seen to this point is consistent back to the site, you've got to have good conversion opportunities. It's got to be convenient. It's got to feel safe. And we can spend all the money we want, but if we're not buttoned up on that front, then we've done ourselves no service, and ultimately we're going to wind up doing nothing with it. So I have to make that point, because I do think we've got to look in the mirror, and I think stores a lot of times like to look at the vendors and say, hey, I added money, I added, my strategy changed, I'm trying all this stuff, but I didn't see any lift. It's like, well, did you start with what you can control on the website? What are we doing to make those CTAs pop, or are we tracking those clicks? And if you're not, how can you blame anybody for performance if you're not looking in the mirror? So I'll leave that part of it with that, because I do think that's an important piece of the pie.
Right on. All right, so we'll bring it home here. We're running low on time. Give us your hot take on your favorite buzzword. We had 3 questions about AI. Basically, what are you using for AI? And so, Ashley, give us a hot take here in under a minute on what you're doing with AI and your perspective on it.
Yeah, I mean, I love AI. I had the CRM Drive Centric was one of their first. I was their first dealer using the Chat GPT piece, so I am full support of utilizing it to help with their customer experiences, answering leads. I'm also utilizing AI from a marketing perspective, so being able to have some tech that's helping and see what your customers are doing, and then being able to follow up. From that sense. And then also you've got it helping with, service phone calls and stuff like that. There's a few things we're exploring in that space.
Awesome. Tyler, over to you.
We are utilizing it. I think she made the point at the very end there, but in our phone systems, we are utilizing it so that we can look at all the phone calls that came in, that they interacted with a member at a store, and it will summarize it and tell you very quickly that it was a good call or a bad call. I mean, there's a grade basically assigned to it, and then it will say, key takeaway: customer was upset about cleanliness of car upon delivery. It will tell you in 30,000 feet in about 2 seconds what the takeaway was. That's not perfect, but it's pretty darn good. And it will help you address issues quickly that otherwise maybe would have gotten left in the dust.
Awesome. Well, thank you both. We could easily keep going for another 30 minutes, and there's definitely more to talk about here, but let's wrap this thing up. If you've made it this far and you don't yet have your own trade pending wobbly bird, Tyler, do you have one?
I do have one.
Okay, great.
You guys always come well prepared with wobbly birds.
Okay,
yes.
Great. So if you're watching this, hit that link, get your bird. We'll send one out to you. Here we are again. Tyler, thank you for spending time with us. Ashley, always great to see you. Thank you for spending time with us as well. Thank you, everybody, for joining with us. And with that, we're going to wrap it up. Thank you, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks.